Good afternoon, and we are here with Mr. Ewell at Congressman Gerald Connolly's Prince William County District Office, and it is Thursday, March 13th, 2014, and the time is 2 p.m. Mr. Ewell, my name is Marion Dobbins, and I'm an intern at George Mason University Folk Life Department. And as you are aware, Congressman Gerald Connolly has taken the initiative to create the Northern Virginia Civil Rights Archive, and it's to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act. So on behalf of Congressman Connolly, the Library of Congress, George Mason Folk Life Department, and the library systems of Prince William County and Fairfax County, we really want to thank you for your participation in this historic project. So are you ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started.
Let's get started.
Okay, let's go.
Let's start with you giving us your full name, where you live now, and then talk a little bit about where you were born and growing up as a child.
Okay. My name is William Ewell. Most people that knows me calls me Mac. And right now I live at 1904 Mariner Lane in Woodbridge, Virginia. And I was raised in Centerville, Virginia. Almost on the Prince William County line between Centerville and Yorkshire. It's the next little town as you cross over into Prince William County. And my growing up was normal. To be totally honest, where I lived, it wasn't a lot of blunt racism from things that I used to read or hear about on TV when we had a TV. You know, some lynchings back then, you know, like further south, Petersburg, Richmond, because our community was really close knit. We was all working people. In fact, I was talking to my brother, which was kind of brought something to my attention. I was raised up in a neighborhood of blacks where you might could say just a little bit above most, because it was government workers. All my uncles and well, most of the women didn't work, but the ones that did worked in the government too. Fort Belvoir, Pentagon. You know, they were like janitors and custodians. It was kind of funny, if I can tell just a little brief story, that my uncles, I remember my uncles, they used to get up in the morning, and when you see them go out to work, they'd be kind of dressed up a little bit, you know, and everything. Because I didn't know they had lockers on their job, because they actually did maintenance work. And they would get into their work suits there, but so we was like all so proud, you know, and even their kids, I don't think they knew that the kind of work that they actually done, but because of the way they would go out and come back in. But they had nice homes. I mean, a lot of our families had, you know, back inside plumbing, brick homes, you know, homes that they built themselves. Because my family was a lot of carpenters in my family, and like I say, we came not a poor neighborhood. I guess probably the poorest was us, the Ewells, you know. But my father made a pretty good living. He didn't have what you would consider a bad job. He was a pipe fitter, construction pipe, like water lines. In fact, we practically built Dale City as far as the waterworks, gas lines. We did all that construction before they actually built Dale City. My father and his crew, which consisted of his boys, because I have 11 brothers and one sister. Okay. And so it was a very unique, which I didn't realize it at the time until I called some of my older brothers yesterday and some of my cousins brought that to my attention about it wasn't quite like a lot of places, surrounding places. But there was a lot of racism. Manassas, especially Manassas. Manassas was really, really rough. You know, going into theaters. I remember when we used to go into theaters, blacks had to go upstairs, and we could only get our refreshments when we first went in. The whites had access all through the movie. And at the drive-in, because I was talking to my brother, we were trying to determine how many rows was it, but we didn't come to no real conclusion. But it was at least the first 10 rows that were whites only. You couldn't get that close to the screen. Drive-in. Mm-hmm. And it was called Pitt's Drive-In. I remember that.
And that was in Manassas.
It was in Manassas. It was the drive-in was outside Manassas, in the Yorkshire area, and the walk-in theater was in Manassas, right off Main Street, right on the corner of Main and I can't recall Old Centerville Road. I believe that's what ran through that. But yeah, I can remember that. I can remember right at the drive-in movie right across there. Everybody used to go to this little fast food place, this little shack, you know, food out the windows, and they had a big sign up there, you know, colors around to the back. They usually said colors of Negroes around to the back, you know. Saying, you know, both got fed out of a window, but we had to go around to the back. We couldn't get fed up the same window because it wasn't a set-in type of a place. It was a fast food place where when the movies let out, you know, everybody run over to grab like a modern day, not a modern day McDonald's, but a McDonald's type of a situation. But they had the big sign up there, you know, colors go around to the back, you know. Although both got served out of windows, but not in the same window.
So at the drive-in, the first 10 rows were for African Americans.
No, for whites.
Okay.
Because they're closer to the screen.
Okay.
We had to sit all the way in the back.
Okay.
You know, where it was harder and not as, you know, because you know, theaters didn't have all this fine tuning like now, you know, and so we had to set. It might have been a half of the theater, really. I'm just saying that, but I now that I'm thinking, it might have been a half of the theater where we had to step back. And they were set up front.
And you could only get a refreshment.
And only get refreshments when we first come in. No sooner as we've come in, we had to get, well, before the movie started. Then once the movie starts, no blacks could go back in. And whites could go back and forth, you know.
Were you ever harassed going to the?
Not so much. Not so much. I mean, you would hear the N-word being spoken, or as we used to call it, the crow calls, you know. You know, people marking a crow or those type things. But
explain the crow call. I've never.
You know, they were like, hawk, hawk. You know, like a crow, black crow.
For Jim Crow.
Yeah, right. For whatever reason, but I guess because the black crow itself. But and the coons. You know, it's called a lot. You know, you hear that. In fact, we used to hear that more when we did the N-word. Coons, called coons. Yeah, that was almost like was the N-word for us back during those days. Was called that.
Okay.
You know, because they say things like, "Well, we're going coon hunting tonight." That means they were going out looking for blacks by themselves. But we never, like I say, fortunately, we never had those type of conflicts. Because I was talking to my brother, which he's 73, and I was asking him. He said, "No, you're right. I was never, you know, never had no real consultation, even when integration started." And in fact, one of my cousins brought to my attention that actually Centerville area was actually had an article in the paper during that time for how peaceful we transitioned into it versus Fairfax. I mean, Fairfax had riots for months, and further down, Falls Church. But in the Centerville area, there was he said there was an article wrote back during that time about how peaceful that we transitioned into the integration up in that area.
So, do you think maybe some of that was because you had such a close community, sense of community?
Yes, and being in a real small town, because Centerville wasn't nothing. Just like I said, IGA store, Hunter's Hardware, a drug store. That's what it was called then, a drug store. I can remember that same little drug store. That only thing we could do when we would go in there before integration was to buy our medicines and things like that. You could buy, but you couldn't sit down. Then the transition was you could come in, you could order food, because those drugstores back then had a hamburger joint and all that. You could order, but you couldn't sit down. Because I remember when we had the rights to sit down, and I remember one time I went in, I was kind of not really bold, but see, I was born right at the peak of that stuff when things changed, where we had rights to go in places and things like that. But it took us a long time. What I mean by us black folks, although you could, but you know that it wasn't as easy as you to walk in and do this, you know, because they had no problem throwing you up out of there or running you up out of there. So I remember I used to go in that drugstore, And being and whoever my boys, whoever I was with, and we'd go in all and they would stand up and I'd go sit down. You know, and they'd be like, you know, like, and I'm like, I can sit down here, you know, which I had right then to do it, but still, you still stayed, you know, as they kind of say, because we was used to it. You know, it was, you know, that's what it was.
Segregation
Right.
had been that way.
Right, and it took, you know, in other words, when they changed that, it wasn't no hooray, hooray, and I'm gonna run and I'm gonna do this. You had to grow out of that.
Okay.
You had to grow out of it. And me being born and right at the line there, I didn't know as much about it as my older brothers, because I'm right in the middle of the pack. And they was more gun shy because they was more used to it totally. You know, you did nothing. You know, everything you did was separate. Or went that way. It went that way. Well, time I got up in my mid-age, it had changed. You know, that you know you could, but you know I remember
With caution.
Right, with caution. Right. I remember this is one place. I used to work for Fairfax County part time when I first got married. I worked for Grand Union when they first came around here. That's my first job of retiring from. And I used to work part-time for Fairfax County. I worked in the courthouse as a janitor, part-time. There was a little place, and I believe that place was called Friendly's Restaurant or something like that, right on Main Street, right down from the police station in Fairfax. And we used to go in there for lunch at night, because we worked at night from 4 to 11. And we used to go in there for lunch, and there would be policemen in there eating, and because the only place was open late. And they had the most racist song that they would put on when we came in there. I mean, I wouldn't even want to listen to it now. It was just that bad. It was a record. Some hillbilly